nervous because I'm here now.
Yep.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin here with my co-host James Haskell. And this episode, we're going to discuss the rumor that's been floating around on social media and elsewhere that the Ravens are the leaders in the clubhouse to eventually sign defensive end Jadeveon Clowney, or outside linebacker, however you have him classified. So that would be interesting. I mean, certainly with the situation going on with Earl Thomas and him being released kind of abruptly or unexpectedly by some, Clowney would certainly provide some added pass rush to help bail out some of that secondary. So what's your initial thoughts when you hear that the Ravens are the leaders in the race for Clowney?
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me because if you recall, I've been on the Clowney train for a while. I was in favor of getting rid of Judon and bringing over Ngakoue and Clowney back. It was way back in the day. This is like February and March, right?
Yeah.
But I'm in favor of it. I like it. I think if you're in win now mode, you got to take calculated risks on players. And he is by far the best way that any team right now could improve their roster, in my opinion. I guess you could put Earl up there too, but we've already been there. We kicked the tires on that one.
Oh yeah.
So I'm in favor of it overall. Obviously, that's money aside, but if you're asking me whether or not I'm in favor of it, I feel good about it. I like it. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for it if we can get it to work out. What about you?
Yeah, I'm excited. I would be very happy. Now, a lot of Ravens fans say no, he's not worth the money he's asking for. And that's fine, but you got to remember, this deal would likely be a one-year deal. And in that case, there's not much financial risk other than the unused cap space that they currently have right now that's not being used at all. So I would be a big fan of it because even if, let's say it works, because I look at the production from a sack standpoint, and I go, how does a guy that talented had never had double-digit sacks? He had 3 last year. But then again, so I look at, all right, let's say worst case scenario. He doesn't perform as a pass rusher, like up to his talent level, and he does disappoint again with low production numbers. Say he gets 3 sacks again. While that would be disappointing, what we're getting at the very minimum is an elite run defender, a guy that can set the edge, do whatever, not just set the edge, but he can shed the blocker, make the play in the backfield against the running back. He's elite at that and has always been elite at that, even in years in which he's disappointed in sack totals. So worst case scenario, you're adding an elite run defender, and that was frankly our biggest weakness was giving up. You look at all the games that they struggled in, the Buffalo game, the Niner game, obviously the Titans game. I mean, I'm sure there's some I'm not. Oh, the Browns game that they lost, the 87-yard run. It was deep. It was long run plays and consistent running that we just couldn't stop that killed us. So to me, at the bare minimum, you're at least getting a boost in that department. So to me, it's a no-brainer if you can get them to come down to the price that's reasonable.
Yeah. So before we get into the finances of it, it sounds like to you, if you had your choosing, and we didn't say in a hypothetical world, we never signed Earl Thomas. If both guys are sitting out there, it sounds like based on last year's performance as a team defensively, you would prefer Clowney based on the fact that he fills a bigger need. Our Achilles heel, if you will, was stopping the run, on a consistent basis. The games that we lost, they bled us to death. They ran the ball really well. Am I understanding that correctly? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, my point is that I think everyone agrees that the Ravens have the number 1 cornerback room in the league. I mean, their 4th corner is Jimmy Smith. They have a pretty darn good strong safety and maybe our smartest player in Chuck Clark playing in the secondary with those guys. So I feel like with that, even if Deshaun Elliott is a disappointment as far as he doesn't play near the level Earl is, which I think is pretty safe to say that he might not reach the heights of a Hall of Famer like Earl, I feel like those guys around him with their powers combined can kind of cover up some of the weaknesses back there just because they're so strong at corner. And now with Tavon coming back and with Chuck being in a full year, as a starter. So I feel like they can cover up. Now, a lot of people say, well, maybe they would have given up a lot more passing yards last year had not been for Earl, and that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. We don't know how this secondary is going to be affected with the loss of Earl until we see it. But I do know this. When I watched the games last year, we had no pass rush when it was a four-man rush. We blitzed more than anyone in the league. Clowney would certainly provide help to that. We were gouged consistently against the better teams on the edges against the run. I mean, we saw the Titans. I mean, Derrick Henry turned Earl into a lead blocker. He certainly didn't help against the run in that game. So does he help against that? Absolutely. So to me, he could be a better fit even than Earl was, and could fill more holes or cover up more weaknesses than even Earl did, especially if we're getting an elite version of Clowney. What if this year Clowney's production finally catches up to his talent, right, and he puts up 14, 15 sacks, and then you look at what Judon could do on to counter to balance that out. You look at what Calais could bring also. I'm just saying, if we get the best Clowney, we know we're not getting the best Earl because he's 30-some years old. He's had multiple leg injuries. Clowney's 27. Physical height as a man. I don't know. He could be better is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and the other thing you got to think about, too, people do talk about Clowney's lack of production, but in the years that the years that he's been most productive and he's really shown out were naturally the years that J.J. Watt was the healthiest, right, when they were playing together. So I don't think anybody – well, there are rare talents that when teams know this is the guy we need to stop from wreaking havoc, and they're still able to do it. There's few guys like that, J.J. Watt namely being one of them. But when you pair him up, like you're saying, with a guy like Calais, with a guy like Judon, look, you'd be hard pressed to find tackles in the NFL that in their heart of hearts are confident going against Clowney in a one-on-one situation for 40 plays, 50 plays, whatever it is, right? I don't think in their heart of hearts they feel like they're going to win the majority of those battles. So they will be forced in those situations, like you said, based on the other guys that we'll have on the line coming at them as well. So I think one of the things that when you're a team in our situation, so this transitions right over into the financial portion of it. I think sometimes there are times where you overpay for things, and that's why you underpay for other things. But when you're in win now mode, look, sometimes you got to put all your chips on the table. That's what it is at the end of the day. So like you mentioned, according to Over the Cap, the Ravens have, which I'd like to do some historical research and find out this late in the season if they've ever had $16.6 million in cap space. So it's pretty impressive. Of course, that's all due. Well, the majority of that's due to Earl Thomas being released. So the question really comes down to, what does it take to get him here? We've heard the $17 million number. My question to you, Glenn, is that do you think we just empty the piggy bank? Do we turn it upside down, break it with the mallet, and just say, here you go? How do you feel about that? And then I'll give you my opinion afterward. But what do you think? I mean, do we just empty it out and give it to him?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one because, when people hear that a guy like that is going to ask for $17 million, of course, the natural reaction is, no, that's overpaid. I mean, there's very few guys that can make the team around them better enough to warrant that kind of a contract. And I don't know if he's shown the production to get that yet, but could he get maybe 15? Now, the question is, I guess to me, is how we know the Ravens are in win now mode. So the question is, how bad do they want to win right now? And that, because I don't think there's anyone that would say that Clowney makes them worse right now. I mean, right. Obviously he increases their chances of winning. Now, by how much, that's up to you to determine. But if they could get him at, say, 15 a year, so he's still making just under what he would be making if he was franchised, which would be 16. And yet so he's going to make plenty of money. And then he hits the free agent market again at 28, still, well under 30, still at the physical height of his body here. I just feel like it would be silly for him to choose the other option. Like, there's two options here. It looks like is the Ravens are going to offer him some money. He could go back to Seattle, which apparently they're still leaving the door open, or he could sit the year out. I find it hard to believe that he would rather sit on a couch and earn $0, or I guess he could. I wonder if he could still opt for that COVID opt out. I think the deadline's passed. I don't even think he'd be eligible for that.
And the other thing too is that it's a lot of people don't know this, but Evan the agent talked about how that's actually just a loan towards your future earnings. So how much of that plays into effect? If you're not under contract, you don't have any future earnings, because technically speaking, he could never be signed again as an NFL player. So who knows? That might even be out of the option for him at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if he was faced with those options, is to sit out, take the 15 or take whatever the other teams are offering. Maybe Seattle's are offering him something around that or lower. I have a feeling he's going to want to play, and he's going to want to play for a contender. And there's no team that's considered, any more of a contender than the Ravens right now. So I feel like he would definitely accept an offer. Now, whether the Ravens are willing to give him that, that's another story. But I think if you go to him with a 1-year, $15 million deal, he takes it.
Yeah, and you know what? You bring up a good point, because in my mind, now that you're talking about it, he doesn't have a ton of options unless Seattle's legitimately leaving the door open. Now, the other thing you got to keep in mind with Seattle is that he knows, I think, that he's got to know for sure if he goes to Seattle, it's going to, like you said, it's going to be a 1-year deal. I don't think they're giving him a big deal because they just got Jamal Adams, and they're going to have to open up the Brinks truck. To me, they just made their mind up. They said, we prefer Jamal Adams as our highest paid defensive player over Jadeveon Clowney moving forward. Because you can't, I don't think feasibly you can do both, especially with how cap strapped they are, with the fact that, they have one of the highest paid quarterbacks, and we're not in that scenario right now. So I think that's something to keep in mind. The other question is, how do you increase your value as much as possible? The Ravens have a ton of primetime games coming up. We're going to, the hope is we go deep in the playoffs, and all those things. So he's going to be in front of a lot of eyes watching. There's going to be people, observing him on a weekly basis. And so I think there's an opportunity for him to play in big moments, make big plays in big games. But this is my question. Now that you're mentioning it, really, he doesn't have a lot of options. So are there enough suitors to even push his price up to 15? Why would the Ravens give him? Why start there? Why not start at 5? I know that sounds crazy, but my point is that how many teams are going to go out there and bid on him, right? It doesn't sound like there's a ton of teams bidding on him. And then this is the other thing you got to think about. On the other side of the coin is that people might say that he's not worth $16 million, but I would argue with anyone on the free agency market, where's a better way to spend $16 million?
Exactly.
Like, based on the outstanding free agents, you going to sign Logan Ryan to a $16 million deal?
Right.
Like, it just doesn't make sense. So what's the lowest you see him taking? Like, do you think 15 is that floor?
I mean, I guess maybe 14. I mean, I see that the Seahawks have a little over 14 million left under the cap, so maybe they're offering him something like 13, because you got to keep some money left aside for injuries and such. But to me, sometimes it's interesting you say that, because typically you have multiple teams bidding for one player, and that drives their price up.
Right.
But if there is no other teams, if there are nobody pushing that price to 15. I have a feeling the Ravens may simply be bidding against his own expectations and his agent's expectations. They may not be bidding against another team, but they may say, look, this is where this is the lowest we'll go for a yearly offer. And if you can't meet that, then my client's willing to sit, and we'll try again next year in a more normal season, maybe outside of some COVID restriction. I don't know, but I think it would be silly. You look at the count at any situation in the past where players have chosen to hold out and sit a season or sit a portion of a season. It rarely pays off. Yep. I mean, it rarely. Yeah, we've seen guys miss camp and come back and it's paid off. But as far as missing regular season games, it has rarely paid off.
Yeah,
I don't know of a time it's paid off, really. So, I mean, maybe I guess you can consider what Le'Veon Bell got from the Jet, but is he happy?
Right.
He's on a terrible team, going nowhere. He's had injury issues, obviously, because his line is trash. He has no team around him. So, yeah, he got some money, but is he happy? I don't know. I don't know what's worth it, if that's really worth it. So,
I mean, I think you got to go back to Emmitt Smith.
Yeah, it's a long time. So, yeah, I mean, I think it would be a mistake to sit out. I think you take what you can get. I don't think anyone's going to be crazy enough to offer him, a ridiculous. They're not going to offer him like $5 million. I mean, they're going to at least come. If the Ravens offer him, they're going to come with a responsible or respectable offer.
Yeah.
So I think it would be silly to sit out. But let me ask you this: is there any way, if need be, that the Ravens could clear out some more cap space in case that 16 isn't enough and get a little more? If they're this close to getting them, could they get some more space?
Yeah, you can get relief in a couple ways. The easiest way, of course, is, people talk about extensions. There's a couple guys up for extensions. We're going to have to make some tough decisions here in the future. So it's a good problem to have. But if you look at Ronnie Stanley has $12.8 million on the books. and 0 in any sort of a bonus. And so if you can extend him and then lower that cap hit, offer him a little bit of, offer him a bonus. Of course, he's going to get more than that as, whatever his guaranteed money will end up being. But, put that into a bonus to lower his cap hit. That's an easy way right there to do it. Same idea for the most part with Marlon Humphrey. And then, of course, there's some other guys, if you want to get a little more creative, where you could restructure their deals, turn some of that money that they got in base salary into a prorated bonus or a signing bonus that they get up front instead of waiting for it, et cetera, et cetera. So, but just those two guys alone,
yeah,
like you said, we're at 16.6. I can't envision us having to clear up that much as far as cap space goes when it comes to a guy like Clowney. Like you said, you have to have reserves, to bring on players in case of injuries and stuff like that. But I would focus on those two. I think Ronnie's got to get a deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, what about Matt Judon, though? I mean,
yeah, that's true, because he's a higher cap hit.
He's
right?
the highest, yeah.
So
but that's if you want to sign him to a long-term deal.
That's a tough one.
I think Ronnie and Humphrey will be the more obvious choices to get that extension, but Matt Judon is first in line.
Yeah, that's a tough one because, it's not always about tenure, but about performance and timing, right? And he wants a contract. I mean, if you look at the guys out there, look at Bosa's contract that he just got, and, a number of other guys. Who is it, the guy that got traded to – oh, yeah, Myles Garrett, the guy that got traded – who's the guy that got traded from the Niners to the Colts? And then
the Buckner?
Yeah, so, I mean, these guys are getting huge deals, and I'm sure Judon wants something comparable. And I don't blame the Ravens for being hesitant on pulling the trigger like that. We have to be fiscally responsible. So one last scenario I want to throw at you here. What if he comes in, and you mentioned this yesterday, what if he comes in and he outperforms? What if they both play well, but he outperforms Judon? Say Judon has 11 or 10 sacks and Clowney has a career year, 13, 14 sacks. Because I don't see us losing both of them,
right?
For the following year. I mean, it could happen, but what do you do then? Are you keeping Clowney? Are you giving that money to him, or are you giving it to Judon? What would you do?
That would be such a tough call for the Ravens front office, because I think if you're telling me that Jadeveon is outperforming him in the sack category, well, we already can pretty much anticipate that he's going to dominate him as far as his performance against the run. Because if you just look up if you look at PFF, their most non-biased grading that I can find, Matt Judon doesn't even compare as a run defender to Jadeveon. I mean, last season was Jadeveon's, I believe, worst run defense, and he had an 80.8 grade, where Matt Judon last season had a 58.7 grade against the run. And that was, like I said, the worst I've seen Jadeveon. In 2018, he had a 91.5 grade against the run, and Matt Judon in 2018 had a 68.5. So he would be dominant in both categories. If you're telling me he's putting up good pass rush numbers, man, that would be tough, because then I think it would come down to what you like. That it just would come down to a lot of things, like locker room. How is he in the locker room? How does he mesh with the guys? How is he in front of the microphone? Because we see that the Ravens love having Matt Judon with a microphone in front of his face. He's in a lot of press conferences.
Yeah.
So, and he's a funny guy. He's a guy that cuts it up with the media, and so I think when you're signing long-term extensions, it's much more than just their on-field performance that comes into it. It's a lot of factors. When you're going to talk about giving somebody that much money, maybe $60 million guaranteed or something, $50 million, who knows? But it's a lot. So I think it would be a tough call from an on-field standpoint. I think they would take Jadeveon, but more goes into it than just on-field performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if I had to choose, I would probably take Jadeveon. But like you said, I mean, availability is the number one.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that's a huge deal in the NFL, of course, and he's not historically, done really well as far as being available at all times. And so that's something to consider as well. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect attendance award every year.
Yep.
So let us know what you guys think. If you're, bullish on it, or you're not with it too much, give us your opinion. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you agree with it or not. Take a second, hit the subscribe button, leave us a like, leave us a comment, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
See you.